All right, let's go out to the desert. Todd Fuhrman, bettheboardpodcast.com, bettheboardpodcast.com. Fuhrman, what is up, man? How are you?
I'm doing well this morning, gentlemen. Hopefully you guys are as well.
Well, Fuhrman, I would have been doing better if Baltimore, if likely, would have gotten the toe in. Boy, that was a tough game, and I told Brown and a few other people I talked to before, I don't know how you felt. I went back and forth on this game. I ultimately gave out the Ravens, and it came down to it.
You know, it never felt so fortunate watching a primetime NFL game that I didn't have to go through a sweat on either the side or total, knowing that the margins there were so narrow. We did a little bit more prop work on the game yesterday and found there to be a couple of avenues. And I think when you're looking at NFL games, even though we don't know exactly what a lot of these teams are going to be early on in the season, this is what you get, and that's part of the reason that you see some of these battles. I mean, there were groups out there laying 2.5, others taking 3. We saw that total ping-ponging between 46 and 47 all day, and lo and behold, it's one play here, one play there that differentiates between winners and losers in a game of that magnitude.
Okay, it's a chance for you to call me the layman. I believe Texas blows out Michigan. Everyone seems to think I'm wrong about this up here.
Everyone.
Boy, I'm the only person that said Michigan will find a way to cover. I have not heard one other person in this world say Michigan will cover.
I thought Brown was with you, that it'll be a close game.
I said I would get back to you.
I mean,
I'm waiting to hear what Fuhrman says.
I mean, how in the heck does Michigan slow down this Texas team? Texas fight all the way.
Well, look, I'm not sure my opinion on this game, Dunaway, can carry that much weight. I'm the one that came on these airwaves last week and thought it'd be a one-possession game in the fourth quarter in Atlanta between Clemson and Georgia, and then I failed to realize that Cade Klubnik is still the starting quarterback there for Dabo Swinney. But when you look at this game, I'm actually on LT's side here. I think the only way to bet it would be to take Michigan plus the 7.5. We've seen this total come down from where it was at a peak in the high 40s, which makes every point that much more valuable. And when you look at Michigan last week, they were no doubt pedestrian vanilla in their 30-10 win against Fresno, but I think that was by design. No reason to tip their hand in terms of what they have or maybe don't have under center with the graduation of J.J. McCarthy. Defensively, though, this Michigan team, in my opinion, will be as good, if not better, than the national championship edition last year. And while Texas looked great on the scoreboard with that 52-0 win, I think that was more of a reflection of Colorado State just not being ready for that game. You look at the Rams, they were able to push Texas off the line of scrimmage, running the football with a slight level of efficiency while that game was competitive. And we know Michigan wants to hit you in the mouth, turn it into a rock fight. We'll see if this young, inexperienced offensive line can hold their own. I think anything over a touchdown, it's Michigan or pass.
Todd Fuhrman with us, bettheboardpodcast.com. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Colorado is at Nebraska. It was a yucky game on Nebraska's side last year. Jeff Sims at quarterback, turning the ball over, just no good whatsoever. I don't know what your opinion of Dylan Raiola was in week one, Fuhrman. I thought he looked the part. I think this is a terrific quarterback matchup with Deion Sanders.
I think Nebraska fans should be extremely excited. When you bring in a quarterback recruit of this caliber, it gives you optimism about what this Nebraska team can do going forward. And for a program that's been starved just to get back to relevance, and when I say relevance, play a postseason game and get to a bowl, I think they'll check the boxes this season in Matt Rule's second year. Now, when we look at the number as far as it pertains to Saturday, asking them to go out there and win by margin against arguably one of the better offenses they're going to play until maybe Ohio State in late October, I think that's too big a leap of faith. When we look at Deion, he's coached 13 games as head coach of the Buffaloes, and the underdog in those games has gone 10-3 against the number. Why do I think that's relevant? Because when you look at the way that Colorado is constructed, it's a defense that leaves a little bit to be desired in terms of creating separation when you're a big favorite, but at the same time, when they're an underdog in Colorado, it's a team that's more dynamic offensively, and they're going to have better playmakers than Nebraska does, especially on that side. You look at Nebraska's strides they've made defensively, and this is a group now that's held 8 straight opponents to less than 400 yards and 24 points or less. But before we decide to anoint Nebraska the second coming of the black shirt defense, you go through those opponents. Last week in the opener, they held UTEP, a program going through transition in check. And before that, the 7 opponents going back to early October last year, it reads a who's who of teams that can't throw the forward pass. Iowa, Wisconsin, Maryland, Michigan State, Purdue, Northwestern, Illinois. I think this will be a jolt to the system. I think Colorado hangs around. I like the Buffs plus the 7.5.
You mentioned Iowa, and for people that play trends and or angles, I think going into this Cy-Hawk game, I think they've already got their plays. I mean, Iowa has won 7 of the last 8. It's gone under 15 of the last 18. I think people will play the favorite and under here. I think Iowa State is better than advertised, Fuhrman.
You mentioned the total, and we can even extend that sample size a little bit further. 17-2 to the under the last 19 meetings between these programs, including 5 straight. Those 19 meetings have averaged a total of 38.7 points per game, but last year was that rock bottom total at 34.5. It was the lowest that we'd seen over the last 10 meetings, with the previous low being 39. And I almost get the feeling when we look at the Cy-Hawk matchup, it's starting to resemble Army-Navy, where everybody knows about the undertrends. So odds makers are forcing you to try and be in a position where you have to make that decision. And in college football these days, even with Iowa, going under a total this low, you almost need more to go right than can go wrong, especially if you get to 17-17. It's a game that goes over. So I lean over the total here, given what I saw last week. Iowa stretching the field a little bit more. I know it was against an inferior opponent in Illinois State, but Cade McNamara appears to have at least a few playmakers at his disposal. And while I don't think Iowa's defense takes a step back from how good they were last year, I actually like this Iowa State offense a little bit. You have 2 talented receivers in Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins. You have a running back in Abu Sama who, in my opinion, by design, only had 5 touches last week against North Dakota, and a more experienced quarterback, Rocco Beck, this second time around than what we saw in the first meeting. Iowa has taken money anytime this number dips below a field goal, but for me, with a total at 35, as ugly as it is, and I'm fully expecting the game to end 13-10, I would lean over the total. I think the number is a little bit low for some of the playmakers these two teams have.
It's an election year, so I'll say it this way. Here comes those liberals from California, Berkeley, into the South, trying to tax Auburn. Will they tax them, or do they have? Does Auburn have more bullets in their chamber? They got Keandre Lambert-Smith now. They got Cam Coleman. They got Perry Thompson and a Peyton Thorne guy that threw 4 touchdowns last year. That was a close game in Berkeley. Doesn't seem like it'll be the same way this week at Jordan-Hare, does it?
You know, I think Auburn fans are going to be on pins and needles for this game. When you look at a Cal team that comes in here who wasn't good last week against UC Davis, the one question that I have is about Jaden Ott and how healthy he'll be. All signs point to him being a full go, but they took him out last week, precautionary reasons. He's a dynamic running back that a lot of the country doesn't know about. I think playing in the ACC now, more people will get familiar with his unique skill set. You mentioned Peyton Thorne and what he did last week, some of the gaudier numbers you're going to see from a passing stat line for Peyton Thorne, but then again, the 4 of us might have been able to go out there and put up 50 against Alabama A&M, given what I saw in the first half of that contest. When we look at the way last year's game went, Auburn clearly a team with a stock arrow up. It's a program that I've talked about and I think will be on my short list next year to try and bet them over the total and maybe even as a dark horse in the SEC. But asking them to win by margin in this game, with Cal having a little bit of revenge from a 14-10 defeat last year, for me, probably too big a number here. I was hoping to get 14 in this game, but we saw the 13s get cleared out earlier this morning. I think it's Cal or pass, but it's a game that I'll find myself on the sidelines for.
Okay, I got called crazy. Who do you think the better quarterback in this matchup is? Francisco Mendoza or Peyton Thorne?
I think Auburn fans, if they see Mendoza running around, might be more intrigued by his level of athleticism and the vertical ball he throws downfield than some of the limitations placed on Peyton Thorne.
Agree.
Todd Fuhrman, BetTheBoardPodcast.com, with us now, and Todd Fuhrman on Twitter. It's where you follow him. Forrester came in and told me that because he types our lines in for the scroll, the MyBookie.ag scroll, when we put the lines up. And
he does that?
Yeah, he does that. Scott handles the graphics.
I thought that was a system we paid for.
So he told me, he's like, hey, one that jumped out at me as I was looking at them, it looks like Tennessee has jumped up a point and a half today. Have you seen that, Tennessee jumping up against NC State? If so, why?
You know, it's been one-way traffic with the Vols for the matchup against NC State, but I think what's most interesting about this game is during the summer months, you had an opportunity to lay 4.5 with Tennessee, and that was actually a price that had been bet down, as NC State was a team that had intrigued professional bettors. Fast forward to week 1, and Western Carolina gives NC State all they can handle and then some for the better part of 3 quarters, and it's the Wolfpack amassing 40% of their total yardage in the fourth quarter. Meanwhile, Tennessee did not miss a beat with Nico, and I think this offense can be as good, if not better, than the way it looked with Hendon Hooker calling the shots. But we have to consider the fact that you're now being forced to pay a premium with the Vols on a neutral laying 10 with a defense that has some questions to answer from the linebacker position and an entirely revamped secondary. all the time when you handicap Tennessee games and you look at trying to beat them, people want to talk about, what defenses can do to slow down the Vols offense. I'm going to go the other way and say the only way that you slow down the Vols offense is force them to keep scoring, and Grayson McCall is going to have to be a little bit crisper than what we saw for the first 3 quarters. From a number standpoint, this price, quite frankly, is ridiculous, and I think if the number gets past 10.5, 11, I'm going to be forced to value bet. But at the same time, wouldn't be shocked at all if the Wolfpack just can't answer with some of the offensive line concerns they have against that Vols defensive front. But a tremendous measuring stick game for how these two teams are power rated. And given everything that we've seen from the ACC through 2 weeks already, I can understand why it's been one-way traffic in favor of the team hailing from the SEC.
I know Boise is a trendy Group 5 pick to actually get into the college football playoff. Watching them last week, look, Genty is outstanding, but their defense, Georgia Southern, 27 first downs, 12 of 19 on third down, 461 yards. They led in the fourth quarter, and now they go to Oregon, and everybody's talking about this Oregon team and this offensive line. They dropped 4 spots in the AP, 3 spots in the coaches. I love Oregon in this spot because I think they'll be able to score at will. Am I wrong here, Fuhrman?
I hope not, because I'm with you, LT. I laid 19.5 with the Ducks here. I made the game 23. So I think the market overreacted a little bit too much to Oregon going out there with a very vanilla attack. We didn't see any RPO components in their Week 1 game against Idaho. And while I know they're an FCS team, Idaho is still a top 5 defense by FCS standards. The one thing that's tough to ignore is that even though the scoreboard wasn't flattering for the Ducks, Dillon Gabriel still threw for nearly 400 yards. Oregon had 31 first downs in that game. And now I think this is the kind of contest that Dan Lanning wants. You don't want your team to look great against inferior opponents, that he'll have the attention of Oregon. The talk this week has been about connecting on those explosive plays, and in steps a Boise secondary that, to your point, gave up gobs and gobs of yards and big plays to Georgia Southern. It was only last year in the season opener when they went on the road to Seattle and were blitzed 56-19 by a Washington team. Oregon's offensive line is going to be the one position group that I am legitimately concerned about this season, and we'll see how they gel before they get into Big Ten play. But I'm not sure Boise's defensive front can create those problems. Dillon Gabriel, enough veteran experience, and this Oregon defense doesn't get nearly enough credit. When we look at the Ducks, their starting linebacker tandem played a combined 17 snaps on the field last week. They're going to sell out, try and do what they can to stop Ashton Genty and force Maddox Madsen to beat them. Boise's still my pick to win the Mountain West, but this is a class difference in my opinion, and I think Oregon will have their full attention on dismantling the Broncos Saturday night.
And for the first time ever, Alabama will put their cleats into something called Saban Field over in Tuscaloosa after they honor the legendary coach. How do you play that game with USF and Alabama?
I lean towards USF catching those generous points, and the main reason is because the Bulls at least have a very capable offense and a quarterback that if the things start to get ugly early, that back door could swing open. Now, USF is going to be tasked with trying to match Alabama, and I'm not sure defensively they're going to belong on the same field given how dynamic Bama looked moving the football against Western Kentucky last week. But for me, it's a numbers thing, and when you look at where that number closed against the Hilltoppers in that 31-31.5 range, I actually have USF 4 points better on a neutral field right now than Western Kentucky, and that may not be aggressive enough. So I came in closer to that 27 range. So if you're going to give me the opportunity to take 31 here, I'm fully cognizant that I could lose this game by 45 or more points if Alabama plays downhill, but from a numbers standpoint, it's USF or nothing.
Favorite game in the NFL this weekend? Because one I'm looking at, and I hate to say this with Brown wearing his Dolphins gear to my right, I think people are sleeping on the Jacksonville Jaguars. You're getting 3.5 this week. What say you, Fuhrman?
I agree that the Jaguars are extremely live in that spot, and I think, when you look at Miami, so there are some concerns for this team defensively, because the key to beating Trevor Lawrence is generating a pass rush, and right now, Miami dealing with injuries. We know no Bradley Chubb, who's been put on IR. We're still not 100% sure if Jalen Phillips is going to be able to go. Jaylen Ramsey dealing with a tweaked hamstring. And Jacksonville has a few dynamic playmakers that can operate in space. And on the other side of the ball, look, I don't think the Jags are going to get a ton of stops, given Miami's track team and the wealth of weapons that they have there. But I like what Jacksonville is putting together along the defensive line. I made the game a field goal, so if you're able to take 3.5, we know the importance of a half point, especially around key numbers there. I'm with you, LT. I think the Jaguars at 3.5 or better are definitely live.
Jaylen Ramsey just agreed to a 3-year, $75 million contract. He's now the highest paid corner in the NFL. I bet you that.
Brownie,
I bet you that hamstring
going against his former team, too.
Yeah, I know, Brownie, but you know what that tells me? Now he's got all that money weighing him down. That hamstring may just feel a little bit tighter today in practice, and no sense of urgency to get out in the field for that season opener.
Exact opposite. That was a hold-in is what that was from you. So hold-in. He got paid. He's about to play against the Jags.
I mean, come on.
What?
I mean, give me. I mean, we're picking the Jaguars.
Dudaway, shut up.
I mean, I can't believe they're doing that. The Bucks by 100, though, right? Am I right?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to be the case. I do have the Bucks under their regular season win total, so I'm hoping it's a team that wins 8 games or less. I'm curious to see what the offense looks like this year without Dave Canales. Baker Mayfield last year put together, a tremendous season, but when you dig into those numbers, he wasn't great on what we define as stable quarterback metrics in terms of what a guy does on first and second downs. But on those unstable metrics and extending drives on third and fourth, Baker was truly elite. Typically, those numbers regress, and what we saw in Seattle, once Canales left there, Geno Smith didn't look quite like the same quarterback. So I think as the season progresses, we could see a drop-off in Baker's overall performance. But one storyline to watch for those folks that get themselves involved in fantasy or maybe even want to dabble in some of the anytime touchdown markets, I'm intrigued to see the usage of Bucky Irving and how that changes the talented running back out of Oregon, because Rachaad White wasn't extremely efficient last year running between the tackles, and I'm not sure Irving gets the touches in week 1, but he's a guy that I'm going to look at prices of 3-1 or greater as I start to see his usage ramp up, potentially be that short yardage back and in goal line situations get those valuable touches.
I really didn't want you to go into detail. I'm a Bucks fan. I don't think we beat the Commanders. We're 3.5 point favorites.
I know you're a Bucks fan. I have to try and expand on this and support my answers with logic instead of coming with the Dunaway school of thought. Flip a quarter when I'm walking into the studio, and that's how I decide on what bets I'm going to make for any given day.
Trust me, Commanders easily take the points. They should be favored in this game.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say, Fuhrman, I think the Commanders are going to be better than advertised this year, but I think it might take a little bit. Rookie quarterbacks in that first start, especially on the road, that's a difficult ask for Jaden Daniels.
It's definitely a different dynamic, and Dan Quinn's got a defense that's going to take a little bit of work. I think they're going to allow Jaden Daniels to have slightly more flexibility in the playbook in terms of the overall command of the offense. What's interesting about that game is there's been a real battle on the total. Every time it gets to 44, there's some under money that enters. I think this game could have some fireworks. You always want to pay attention to weather this time of year down there in the Gulf area, but it looks like the forecast relatively clean other than maybe a pop-up shower. No reason for me to believe this isn't a 24-21 type football game.
Yeah, and by the way, 91 at kickoff with humidity. So
that's why Jacksonville, that's the problem. They're going to melt in Miami too, man. Jacksonville can't handle that Miami heat. Washington can't handle that Tampa heat.
That is Todd Fuhrman with us today. Bet the Board podcast. Fuhrman, man, thank you. We appreciate you so much.
Always a pleasure, gentlemen. Enjoy the great slate of games this weekend.